Retro gaming hardware and software. For, for playing retro PC games or PC games made from 1981 to 2000, could be played on actual computer hardware or on an emulator. The emulators have limitations. They may require a massive amount of CPU processing power, or they may only emulate MS-DOS software. For example, PCEM requires a very powerful processor, and emulator like Dosbox 0.74 only allows you to emulate DOS games. In addition, every game does not work on an emulator. That's another problem with the emulator. It won't run 100% of the software. Some programs you'll have problems running. And when you run the software, it's not as smooth as running it on the actual hardware. On the other hand, playing games on actual computer hardware is always better. But it isn't always easy to get this hardware. Throughout the years, a lot of this hardware has been thrown away and destroyed. In addition, the best computer hardware that you could still buy is a socket 423 or a socket 478 Pentium 4 based computer. So Pentium 4s are still readily available. So back about 10 years ago, or maybe 13 years ago, Pentium 2s and Pentium 3s were readily available, and it was pretty inexpensive. And back around like maybe 2006, it was possible to buy 486s, and they were readily available as well. But now they're not. They're very it is almost impossible to get a 486, and it is nearly impossible to get a 386 computer or a 286. And it's very difficult to get a Pentium 2 or a Pentium 3 based retro computer now. But I would say the Pentium 3 would be the most ideal computer to get, because it could run every DOS and Windows 95, 98 based program or game. So that would be the best hardware to get. So as for Pentium 4s, these computers will play almost every game from 1995 to 2006. So it'll play every game, every Windows 95, 98 game. And it can also play Windows XP games made from 2001 to 2006. So that's the advantage of owning a Pentium 4. And 286s to Pentium 3s will be almost impossible to find. And if you found one, you will be very lucky. So my solution is playing DOS-based games on emulators like Dosbox 0.74 or PCEM. The PCEM emulator can play most Windows 95, 98 games produced from 1995 to 1998. When you get to 1999, you needed at least a Pentium 2 to play most games. A Pentium 4 will be able to play every game that can be played on a Pentium 2 or a Pentium 3. So as you can see the chart on the top left corner, Dosbox 0.74 emulator can play most games from 1984 to 1995. And not every game will run perfectly. But it'll run most games. As for 1996 to 2000, it's not going to be able to run any games on DOSBox 0.74. So as for PCEM, it could run, depending on the BIOS that you use, you could run every game from 1984 to 1998. And technically you could run games from 1999 to 2000, but it's way too slow because there's a BIOS limitation. The BIOS only allows you to use up to a socket 7 Pentium 2, which goes from 166 megahertz to 233 megahertz, regular Pentium socket 7, and that's too slow for 1999 to 2000. You need much better hardware. You need at least a Pentium 2 to run games from 99 to 2000. So as for 386 SX and DX based machines, they could run every game from 1984 to probably 1994, and after that 1994, it's too slow to run most programs. You would need at least a Pentium 4, and a Pentium 4 SX DX can run every program from 84 to 1995, but 486s are too fast for earlier games made in, let's say, 1984. It would run so fast that you couldn't play it. So as for socket 5 Pentiums, these Pentiums would be like Pentium 60 megahertz to I think a Pentium 120 megahertz computer. So these can run most. It would be too fast for 1984 games to 1985 games. However, you can run them. You could run every game perfectly from 1984 to, I would say, about 1997. Then after that, it became way too slow. You would need a socket 7 Pentium. A socket 7 Pentium is equivalent to a AMD K6-2, I think, and that would run every DOS game and Windows game from 84 to, I would say, up to 1998. And after 1998, it's too slow. You would need a Pentium 2. So then after that, you have a socket Pentium 2 slot 1. You could run most games from every game from 1993 to about 2000. You wouldn't have a problem running operating system like Windows 3.1, 3.0, Windows 95, Windows 98, MS-DOS 6.0 or higher, and then you have a Pentium 3 socket 370 below that. It would be too fast for early games made in 84 to 1992. However, you can run them, but it would be so fast that it wouldn't be playable. And it's ideal for playing games from 1993 to all the way up to 2000 for Pentium 3 slot 1 or socket 370. And then for Pentium 4 socket 423s, it could run an operating system like Windows 3.0 or 3.1. It could run MS-DOS 6.0 or higher. So you could play every game from 1993 to 2000. And probably beyond 2000 also, maybe from 2000 to 2005, you could run most XP games as well. So it's more versatile. And you have the Pentium 4 socket 478. It's like the socket 423, except it's a lot faster. So the megahertz rating for 478 would be, I think it's from maybe 2.6 gigahertz, 2.66 gigahertz to maybe 3.4 gigahertz Pentium 4. So that could run every game from 1993 to up to 2006. You could run MS-DOS 6.0, Windows 3.01, 3.0, Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows 2000, and Windows XP. So that's the most versatile. And on the right, you see another chart that says operating systems. So from 1981 to 1995, MS-DOS was used, and there's various versions of MS-DOS. I think they have 1.0, MS-DOS 1.0 to 6.22. I'm not sure, maybe 6.0. And under that you have Windows 3.x, that's 3.1, 3.0, 3. Maybe 2.2, and that was used from I think 1990 to maybe 1995 Windows 3.x platform. And you have Windows 95, 98. This was used from late 1995 to 2000, and after that it was replaced with Windows XP around late 2000. So you have hardware and software availability. So let's see. So that's for 286 to 486DX computers. It's very expensive to get one, and the availability is very low. So you have sockets 5 and 7 Pentium based computers. Also, it's expensive and it's not available. And Pentium 2 and Pentium 3 based computers, whether they be socket 370 or slot 1, it's expensive and they're not available either. So, and Pentium 4 socket 423s, it is somewhat more rare to find. It is kind of expensive, and it's not as readily available as a Pentium 4, 478, and 478 socket Pentium 4s are very cheap, and they're readily available. It's not expensive, because a lot of Pentium 4s were built from, I think it was built in the first ones were built in 1999, and they were built all the way up to 2005 as for socket 423s to socket 478s. They were built from then, so it had a very long life compared to these other CPUs, because the Pentium 2s were produced from, I think, 1998 to maybe 1999. And Pentium 3s were produced from 1998 to maybe up to 2000, with the latest Pentium 3s being, I think, as high as 1.4 gigahertz. So Pentium 4s had a very long production run. So there's still a lot of them, but maybe 5 years from now, they will probably be very difficult to find as well, because back in 2006 Pentium 3s were available. They were cheap, and now they're not. So we can conclude that that would be the case for Pentium 4s, because they're not being built. And as for Dosbox 0.74 emulator, you could just download this and use this on any computer. It doesn't require a lot of CPU power. So So you could technically run it on a Pentium 4 or any modern computer, and it should run. And you have the PCEM emulator. That's also free. It doesn't cost you anything, but you do need you will need at least a third generation i5 or i7 computer to use it. Most ideal would be having a computer with a clock speed of 3.4 gigahertz or higher. Being a i5 or i7 based processor, third generation or higher, that would be the most ideal, and that's all you need. And you can emulate games with the PCEM emulator, like 286 and 386 games, and that will not require a lot of computing power, you know. So my solution is using the PCEM emulator to run games that were produced from PC games produced from 1984 to maybe up to 1992, and then using a Pentium 4 to run games from 1993 to 2006. So this way you could get the wide range of you could play a wide range of computers from different time periods, you know. Use a PCEM emulator to run DOS games, and the PCEM is much better than Dosbox 0.74 emulator. It runs much more smoothly than Dosbox, and you're not going to have any compatibility issues running most games. I think it would run 99% of most DOS games produced from 82 to 1993. You wouldn't have any problems with it. And you can even install Windows 3.0 and 3.1 on it, and it would run it perfectly. So you could use a PCEM emulator on a modern computer and run games from 1982 to, I guess, 1995. So run MS-DOS games from MS-DOS 2.0 to 6.22 DOS, that is, and run Windows 3.0 to 3.1, though you'd cover 1982 to 1995, and then you would use a Pentium 4 to run games from 1996 to 2006. That would be the most ideal solution. It would be the most cost-effective one as well. Okay, thanks for watching.